The men ran into the once sprawling halls of the dwarves. Just mere weeks ago, you would hear the shuffling of armored feet, the clinging of coin being spent, and hearty laughter over pints of ale, now replaced by chittering in the dark. Hoping to find anyone, dwarf or man, maybe holed up in a barricaded room, they went in deeper, deeper into the dark. Where the light grew dim, the chittering grew loud. Pushing open the large doors to the inner sanctum with a loud creak, they rushed in to find salvation. But the only thing that could be found was lost hope. Dwarven bodies lay in a circle in the center of the room. Scraps of clothing and armor torn and hanging off their gnawed bones. In their despair, they didn't notice that the chittering had been replaced by the scraping of claws over stone. They looked behind them. The large door they entered through swallowed by the darkness. They saw no help, no rescue, only the glimmering red eyes reflecting the light of their torches all around them. Instinctively moving into the very same circle, back to back, they stood defiant against onrushing doom. The red eyes swarmed towards them. Most could maybe get a single strike off before they were swarmed by the overgrown rats, crawling over them, under their armor and biting, tearing into their flesh. Screams were quickly suffocated by the literal sea of vermin. There was no escape, only death, in the form of yellow teeth, skittering claws, and those damned red eyes. With that intro, I hope the mood is properly set for today's story, since this one doesn't come with a happy ending. Unless you're red, then you should be absolutely stoked for this one. Our story starts a few thousand years ago with the founding of Tylos. Tylos was a magnificent city, founded on prime real estate between the Irana Mountains and the Tylean Sea. That's just in between where nowadays Tylea and Astalia meet. Tylos was founded at first by the tribal ancestors of the Tylean people. With such a sweet spot, it didn't take long for the city to flourish, both through trade and due to the rich farmland. A clan of dwarves then not only discovered the city, but also the mountain just behind it. And dwarves, being experts on everything rocky, saw that the mountain themselves held even more riches. So the dwarves and humans formed an alliance. The dwarves started digging into the mountains and shared their expertise with crafting and masonry with the humans. The humans in turn would make them both fat stacks by selling and trading the dwarven-made tools and wares. And they would also provide the dwarves with food from their farms. Together, the city of Tylos became the pride of the old world. Thanks to the dwarves' expertise, this city switched from primitive wooden buildings to massive stone walls and houses of granite. While under the city, the dwarves created a massive hold of Kavzar that was just as magnificent underground as the city was above ground. Just darker. Of course, when you're making fat stacks like that, you want to show it off. So, they wanted to build a temple with a massive bell tower, the largest structure the world had ever seen, both to honor their gods for all the blessings they had received, and to wave their huge, hard and erect tower in everyone's face.
Phrasing?
First, they went to the dwarves for their know-how. The dwarves themselves didn't care much about worshipping gods with giant phallic objects. But they were still very much interested in helping, both because it was an actual challenge and to be able to boast once it was finished. Entire generations were born, grew up, started helping with the construction, grew old and died before it was even close to finished. If you think that's silly, then think again. Notre Dame took us 200 years to build, and that's without orcs yipping at our ankles. Anyway, after a few generations were burned out by this thing, the dwarven ingenuity and stubbornness, and the human inability to take no for an answer, saw the tower finished. reaching into the sky just as high as it went down into the earth and the dwarven hold. The only thing left to do was to get the brass bell into the tower proper. You know, the giant bell made of brass, the giant brass multi-ton bell. Yeah, no. Even the dwarves couldn't find a way to get that thing up there. They built cranes for cranes. They probably even tried just shouting at the damn thing to get up there.
Alright, listen to me, you piece of shit!
But to no avail. Despair actually flooded the city when the realization set in that they had wasted multiple generations into building this thing and they couldn't finish it. You know, like how college students feel when they graduate and only Starbucks or McDonald's wants to employ them. Kinda like that. But just then, a nice stranger came along and waddled up to the temple. He looked upon the tower and said that he'd help them finish that thing. When the people asked him how, he replied,
Magic.
But the stranger had a demand. He wanted to carve symbols of his own god into the bell, so he could use this magnificent tower to praise his god as well. Well, tower's big enough for a single god more, innit? What could possibly go wrong? So they agreed. The stranger then told them to bugger off so he could work in peace and only to return at midnight. Just before midnight, the people woke up and flocked to the temple. They looked up at the tower and saw the brass bell, gleaming in the moonshine with the stranger's runes glimmering. They wanted to find the stranger to thank him.
Hell, I like you. You can come over to my house and fuck my sister.
But he was long gone. And then, at exactly midnight, the bell started to toll. Why is it tolling now? Who is doing it? And why is it so loud? During the tolling, the few people that could actually take their eyes off the tower saw that more sleep started to glow brighter and brighter. After 13 ear-shattering gongs of the bell, green lightning struck through the black night sky, and the darkness rolled in that blotted out the sky completely. Well, that just happened, said the townsfolk, and decided to go back to bed and deal with this nonsense the next morning. Except, morning didn't come. Little did they know it would never come again. When they woke up, they saw only darkness. Or, well, didn't see, cause it was too dark. Cause of the darkness. Already slightly miffed, their day only got worse when it started to rain. Now, this wasn't like the rains in England. This rain was black, pouring down onto the city and surrounding lands, turning the landscape bleak, and the streets looked like they were run through with ash. Crops withered, soil blighted, and the fearful people took shelter in their houses, desperately praying for the rain to finally stop. Actually, that sounds exactly like England. The rain kept pouring for months. The areas where fields once were found themselves to be little more than swamps. The city had large food reserves, but had to discover that rats, who grew ever larger and fatter, were plundering their stocks. What little food could be saved from the rats was now blighted by the plagues the vermin carried into the city. With starvation now being a very real threat, Tylos sent out messengers into the world to find someone, anyone that could help them, none of which returned or were ever seen again anywhere else. But remember, it can always get worse, which the people realized when the rain got replaced by a hail. But not hail of ice, but of weird glowing green stones. The ones landing into the fields would sink into the soil, giving it an eerie green glow and making the fields now all but impassable. Stones that landed into the city would rest where they struck, those in the city in that same green glow. Just like the rain before, this hail wouldn't stop, dousing the city and the entire area in a permanent layer of those dark green glowing stones. Looking upon them for too long invited illness. So the people did what they could and closed the blinds and prayed. The horror didn't stop outside of the houses though. Any newborns that would still be brought into this cursed world were twisted, mutated, barely recognizable as human. With the food now all but gone, the rats were now hunting for other prey to feed upon, seemingly unbothered and even enjoying the glow of the green wogs. They grew even fatter and larger than before, unnaturally so. Some were even seen walking on the hind legs. But surely this was nothing but hallucinations. What else grew with their size was their hunger and the ferocity to quell it. Leaving your house was almost impossible, as the swarms of rats would home in on the warm scent of fresh meat and devour it, living or not, screaming or silent. In a last effort to save the few that remained, they took their weapons and braved the hailstorm to find their way to the entrance of the dwarven hold. They had built the city together. They had built that tower together. They must help us. The dwarves had sent them away once before, claiming that they had no food to spare. Lies. We know what we brought down there. It was enough to last years. And this time, we would not take no for an answer. The rats kept their distance from such a large group, stalking them, following them from the darkness, the green glow reflecting from the red eyes to produce a wretched color. People claim that black is death's color, but no, the people from Tylos learned that it was this color, whatever it is. Finding themselves smashing against the giant gates to the dwarf hold, they were ignored. But they had already prepared themselves to not take no for an answer, so they rammed open the doors, just to find nothing, except a putrid smell chasing through the halls. Walking deeper and deeper into the dwarven hold, on the search for survivors, or at the very least the food they hoarded, they found nothing but cold stone halls, the silence only disturbed by the chittering of vermin and the scratching of claws on stone. They were now forced to face the truth that the dwarves hadn't been lying, and that they had fought and lost to the same rodent plague that was wrecking their lives on the surface. Well, at the very least, they had now found themselves a nice tomb, which would be shared with their dwarven friends. They didn't need to wait long to use it, as the rats finally grew more hungry than scared and descended over them as living waves of biting and chittering vermin, while their once beautiful white city slowly eroded by the green glowing stones and sunk deeper and deeper into the marshes that were once fertile fields. Only the tower, that damn tower, would reach out of the marsh, high and mighty, with the bell still tolling every midnight to the chittering and squeaking of its new inhabitants. Who would crown their first city, their very birthplace, as Skaven Blight. Nobody ever heard of Tylos anymore. It slowly faded from memory. Surely it was just a myth. After all, there was nothing but toxic putrid marsh and swamps where this glorious city was supposed to be. Who the hell would build a city there? Like, it's literally glowing. It would be easily dismissed as the same rubbish as talking red man. Such silliness. It would have been little more as a fairy tale, if it weren't for the accounts of both men and dwarves that both report of the destruction of Tylos and the Doom of Kavzar. Especially the dwarf version, which is written like an actual rhyming poem, is a must read. I was thinking of reading it here, but I would like to still have some subscribers left by the end of this video, so I will refrain from chasing them away by citing poetry. Now, I am sure you have some questions, so let's try to answer the most glaring ones. Who was the stranger? Obviously we don't have a straight answer, but it was most likely one of the few remaining old ones on the planet. The Skaven themselves also talk about this strange man, which is remarkable since at that point they didn't even exist as anything but just simple rats. But they somehow remember him, and that they were created by him, and they call him the Shaper. They also know he is not a Skaven, since they refer to his race as an older one as ours. The theory that it was an old one is mostly based on what the hell else could it have been? Since to complete the tower on its own in less than a day, this creature must have possessed either powerful magic or technology. Both would be the same to the people of that time period. The Great Screaming Bell, as the Skaven call it, that was installed into the tower was also engraved with weird runes, which we know to be a way to access or interact with the warp and the winds of magic, turning it basically into a chaos energy beacon of some kind. Why this old one thought the world needed extremely violent human-sized rats, we don't know. Then there is of course the hail of weird green glowing rocks. Now, for those in the back of the class, this is of course warpstone, which, thanks to the Great Screaming Bell's effect, whatever it does, started raining down upon Tylos and its land, blighting the whole area so that only the Skaven can live there. It also seems to have been the catalyst to mutate the swarms of rats into the Skaven we know and love today. And finally, how the hell do poems exist of this catastrophe if nobody survived? Well, there is of course no direct answer, but you need to remember Tylos was a trade hub, so many neighboring cities and villages knew of Tylos. It is likely that maybe someone came to check it out, and while maybe not being able to reach what was no Skaven blight, they might have found one of the riders, either deceased or dying, who told them what the hell was going on over there. For the dwarves it's easier. The dwarves have the Angdrin Angkor, the underways, that connect many of the holds underground. So it's possible that some dwarves may have escaped or were sent through by their kin before they detonated the entrance so nothing could come back in nor out. If you then ask why not all dwarves escaped, well, they are dwarves, fighting slightly oversized rats and losing to the slightly oversized rats. I'm pretty sure they would prefer death than to tell the other dwarves that they lost one of the richest holds in their history to a bunch of funky rats. So, that was the short story of the Doom of Kavzar, or the destruction of Tylos, or the rise of Skaven blight. Pick the title you like best. People compare it to the Tower of Babel, but I don't agree, to be honest. This was not a story about the hubris of man, but rather a story on how you should not trust strangers that want to fondle your belts in the dark. The story also highlights why the Skaven are the way they are. Like, during their entire creation, or birth if you will, they were surrounded by death and plague, only knew extreme hunger, and were raised performing a double genocide. Talk about a role model, I guess. Anyway, I hope you liked the video, and you know the drill. Give it a like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this, and visit me on Twitter to get daily Warhammer facts. Anyways, thanks for watching and see y'all next time. Cheers!